Welcome to the introduction of HCM HR. While this draft recording is not role specific, it will provide an introduction on how to use PeopleSoft HR. To access PeopleSoft, you must log in and authenticate through the MyCoyote portal. Then you're going to go to the Administrative Systems tab. From the Administrative Systems tab, we're going to be focused on the PeopleSoft HR environment. This is the human resources environment. If you use the student environment, which is known as Campus Solutions, we use single sign-on. When you click on this, in production, it takes you to Campus Solutions to the student record side. The basic menu for both systems is the same. On the Campus Solutions side, you do not have this menu here. For the Campus Solutions side, it'll be blank, and you have to navigate using the drop-down menu, which we also refer to as breadcrumbs, and I'll cover those in a few seconds. So typically the header right here is going to tell you what environment you're in PeopleSoft. Document. So some of the basics we're going to go through. We've already covered how to log on. We're going to look at some navigation options that are available for you. There's no right or wrong way to navigate. It is primarily a choice from the user, whether you use the breadcrumbs, you use the folders or the links, etc. I'm just going to provide you some of those steps that are easy for you, or that I think will be easier for you. I'm going to show you how to do a CSUID search and how to identify certain factors about a person. We're going to navigate through favorites, how to add a new value. Typically, adding a new value and correcting history, those two categories are for those departments that hire employees. If you're just going to be viewing employees, you won't use these features, so I'm going to just spend a little time on those. And some data entry. Again, if you're hiring, you'll be entering data entry. So we're just going to preview those points. And then I'll just show you how to run queries in the system and how to use some features there. So let's talk about navigation. This search box here is really a wonderful thing to see because I always get excited that it's there, but unfortunately it does not work. So it doesn't benefit you. Just act like you don't even notice it. I wish I could change it. See, it doesn't do anything. And even if I try to search for something, it doesn't give me any result. In the main menu up here on the left, we have favorites. And under favorites, whatever pages you navigate to, it's going to keep a history of your recently used pages, and then your favorites will be at the bottom. As we add favorites, you can edit them and put them in a sequential order. And I mentioned the main menu up here. As we begin to navigate, we'll start to see other links that appear. Those will be called or referred to as breadcrumbs. Over to the right, once we navigate to an area, we can always come back to this home page by selecting this home link. We do not use work list. Add to favorites is the same feature that we have over here on the left to add favorites. And of course, sign out. When you're in PeopleSoft, especially in the HR, I have to say in both Campus Solutions and HR. On the finance side, that is public information, but in HR and the student information, you have exposure to a lot of personal data that's covered under FERPA. So you want to make sure you sign out here, then sign out of your MyCoyote portal if you're done using the system. Personalize, we do not use these links here. We don't personalize or do anything with the layout. Help, you can try using help, but most of the time we like to encourage you to go to the subject matter expert of the area that you're working in for assistance. We are going to start with the CSUID search because that is probably the most commonly used search. And then I will just highlight some important components there. I think I've covered all of the components that are on the basic page here, the main menu, your headers, etc. So I'm going to select one of these hyperlinks. Within these hyperlinks, there are other folders that have other transactions that you can use. This arrow here, if I click on that, it brings in some additional information. So with the arrow facing down, it's just suggesting that we have other links open. So pretty basic navigation information. So everything within PeopleSoft uses hyperlinks also. So I'm going to select the CSUID search hyperlink. And now it brings me to a search page. And you're going to discover as you're using the system, you're always going to be sent to a search page. Whether you're looking at workforce admin, you're just looking at basic data. One of the most important things I can emphasize in this training, do not navigate to a place that your job does not require you to. That's a violation of privacy. While I may have a lot of ability to access things, as a trainer, I really don't have a need to look at benefits for Tina Newton. I'm not going to navigate there because I'm protecting Tina's privacy and I'm protecting myself in my job. So I just want you to always keep that in the forefront as you're working in the system. Security keeps us pretty locked out of areas that we shouldn't see, but sometimes in order for you to get this link available, you may have to have access to a couple of other things. So that's why I make that qualifying statement for your protection and the protection of others. Under CSUID search, you can search by an employee ID number, which is a 9-digit number that's automatically assigned in the system when a new record is added. The national ID, also known as a social security number, is not a common way to search. So typically we don't use this field. Applicant ID, that's more in the HR side if those applications are kept in our PeopleSoft system. So the three more common ways to search is an EMPL ID, the MyCoyote ID, first name and last name. When you are searching by EMPL ID, if you have a portion of the ID, let's say for this person, I only have 21345. And our Coyote ID is a 9-digit number. I don't know what the first few numbers are, so our wildcard is a percent sign. So I put a percent sign at the beginning, and if I click search, notice in the right-hand corner there was a search, like a processing icon. And now what the system did is it brought back anyone that had a portion of this criteria. If you look down here, we can see that. Something that's really cool here in the system is that across all modules, you can sort by any of the column headers. So we can sort by any of these column headers, and we'll go over these in a moment. So this is one way you can search using a wildcard. I'm going to click Reset to clear these fields. Now I'm going to use first name, last name. When you're using first name, last name, if you misspell the name, you're going to find no matches, or you may find a match that's not a correct match. Our best practices request that we search by the first 3 letters of the first name and the first 3 letters of the last name. This will bring back several results, but it gives us an opportunity to make sure we're looking at the right person. The person I'm looking for is an employee, but they're a student employee. I'm looking for Katia Corona, and as you could see in these results, so we'll start with detail. I'll cover in just a moment. We'll come back to this hyperlink. So we have name, employee ID, the last 4 digits of the person's social security number. If they're an applicant, there's an applicant ID, their date, I should say month and day of birth. This is another good way to match criteria to make sure you have the right employee. Notice that I also have active and inactive. So the employee classification, Then we go to organizational relationship. Org-rel is organizational relationship. So it's telling us this is an employee, this is an applicant. A CS person, that is a student. So the person of interest type, typically you'll hear the POI type will tell you whether they're a student or not. If they're an employee, we're going to see it under org relationship and what their classification as an employee is. Are they a student, regular, emergency hire? We see on the screen here. Under HR status, you can see if they're active, inactive. Occasionally we'll see terminated, but mostly active, inactive. EMPL record numbers. We'll talk a little bit about EMPL record numbers. So all of our records start with 0. If I see this person that has 3 records, they actually have 4 because the first record started with 0. I'm mostly interested in Katya's current active record. The 0 record that is active is a student job code 1871. They're an on-campus work study. The department they're in is BF 0700. Let me talk a little bit about department ID. BF represents, B is the department number with 0700. That's the department ID on the budget side, B0700. BF helps me identify that this person is a faculty or a student. We go up to the top here. This person, while they are inactive, they were an admin support assistant, which is different from a student. So they were an actual employee. Notice that their DEPT ID is C1400, but there's an S instead of an F. When you see the S, that represents staff. First letter is the department location, and the last 4 digits are the department ID. The S or the F, the S represents staff, the F represents faculty or student. Then we can see the department ID description, and then all of us, most of us, business unit is SBCMP, that's the state side. But you see SBFEN, the foundation. Let's look at her active role and click on detail. I'm kind of jumping ahead here, but I'm going to pause before I go into these fields and show you how to save a favorite. Typically, when you're saving a favorite, you're going to be adding a favorite on the search component page. So for example, for this one, I can add a favorite by clicking on add a favorites here to the right. This is modify a person. So even though I'm looking at Katya Corona, it's telling me that I'm in the CSUID search, and now I've moved to another component. In the breadcrumbs I can see up here, modify a person. I'm going to click OK. My favorite has been saved. If I go to favorites on the top left menu, showing me my recently used, but it also has modify a person. Before I click that, I'm going to copy that. But on the modify a person page, you can see I clicked the details link on the CSUID search, and it gave me some information about this person, details, biographical details, contact information, and regional information. So I'm going to select home. I'm going to go back to where we started, and I'm going to go to my favorites. I just saved this favorite, and it brings me to this page. So you want to make sure when you're saving your favorites that you set it up at the search page. So let's go ahead and biographical, modify a person. This is where my favorite should be. I'm going to clear this. I'm going to add to favorites. And it says you already have this that exists, you want to override it. Yes, because I don't want to always go to Katya's record. I may have to look at other employees. So we'll go back home, favorites, and now it should bring me to the search page. So in this search page, we all on the find an existing value page, We have some components that we mentioned earlier. Again, these top three are the ones you're going to use the most when you're looking for someone. Depending on your role and your purpose, you can include history and you can correct history. Case sensitive isn't as important. If you are in the central HR office or central academic personnel or academic resources, you may have to correct history. Again, that's going to be based on your role. So you need to make sure that you select these. Include history is good to include so that you can see all of the records of that particular employee. Before I click search, I'm going to mention add a new value. When you're in a hiring role, you will be adding a new value. We do not assign an EMPL ID. We allow the system to automatically generate that. Go ahead and search. And now we're back at the page. So if you're correcting history or updating information, you're going to have the access to enter information on this account here. So let's say we had her birth year wrong. Once I populate that, it should update, once I save it, correct age for this person. I can also change any of this information. Again, based on your role and your access, be very, very careful when you're in PeopleSoft. You don't want to change something in production. Most of the time, you're going to be probably just viewing and not having live fields like I do. Again, we see these arrows here. They're collapsible menu options that you can hide information. To add a row of data, the plus is to add a row, minus is to remove a row. And we'll see that here also. Down at the bottom, we have some buttons. So we have a save, we can return to search. There's something called notify. Let's say I wanted to share with you the information on this page. Always remember, if it's confidential, think about FERPA, protecting the privacy of our employees. When you send a notification to another employee to view something, they're going to need to log in with their ID. The wonderful thing about PeopleSoft is that we can do this. However, everything that you're doing, everything that we're doing right here is being tracked. So if someone were to go and audit my ID, they could see everywhere that I've navigated. So it's kind of a cool thing to have that. I can click on Next tab and see we're on the Biographical Data tab. If I click on Next tab, it takes me to contact information. Here we see some of the plus minus buttons to add, remove data, and then you can update data based on your ability and your role. Next tab, refresh, just refreshes the page. This add mode is going to allow me to add information, and it depends on the role. You can include history and correct history. If you remember back on the search page, I had those two boxes selected, and then when I did the search again, I did not select them, so it gives you an opportunity to do that here. Well, I'm going to go back to the home. Let's save whatever changes I made here. Notice the saved in the top right, and just highlight that within each of these components, there are folders or they show up as folders and links. So here we have some folders. Here we have direct pages. Again, everything's based on your role and what you're going to be using in the system. I think the primary or the most important piece is being able to understand how to get to the CSUID search, what the results of the CSUID search is going to provide you. So I am going to go to my favorites, and I'm going to go back to my CSUID search. I don't typically save CSUID search as a favorite because it's on the main menu and it always shows up in my recently searched because I use it often. You're going to search for an employee, Tina. And it only gave me one result, Administrator 3 in the International Education Office. So you can see that on the CSUID search, we can find a lot of information about an employee. Typically, I use this to find out what department they're in, or I want to know what their job code is. I'm trying to classify groups of employees for certain things, etc. Another important feature that we're going to talk about here on this page that you will see on different pages is the navigation within the page. Say I move this out a little bit, and I'm not necessarily looking for a new W, but I'm looking for anyone with NE. I'm going to hopefully get a longer list of results now. So here I have a lot more names. Okay, so I want to, again, whenever you see personalize, we ask you to not personalize your pages until you become a more advanced user. We've had on occasion new users try to personalize their page and then they forget that they personalized it and they can't find certain features. So we just discourage the use of the personalized. But find is kind of cool. So let's say I have this long list of T and E results, and I know that the employee that I'm looking for has a 9994 in their ID. So while I don't know what their name is, I'm going to use this find feature, and hopefully it results in a couple of ways. It will either highlight it very faintly. You can see that it's a little darker on the screen. It's 994. Or sometimes it brings it up to the top. That's what the find feature does. This icon you'll see throughout the system is the download icon. It downloads anything on this current page to Excel. So across all of the modules, if you see this download icon, depending on your system, it typically provides the file down at the bottom in your download. And it's over here that I just put on the screen. Great. My system asks me, do you want to open this? So I say yes, and then I'll drag it over here. And what it's done is everything that's on that page, it's provided for me here. So that download feature is a very cool feature. Then you can take this data, manipulate it in Excel. CS will help you with the manipulation. We just ask you again to keep the privacy of the data of our employees protected. So anytime you're pulling any information that could expose some private information, to please protect. The person organization summary. We've looked at the CSUID search, which is a more common used feature. Typically, the person organization summary, you'll be able to see what their relationship is here. You can see their organizational relationship. There's nothing else you really need to look at. Again, if you have access to the detail link, it's going to take you to some general information about that employee. So I'm going to skip the person organizational summary. I don't believe we'll be using that. However, if you need help with it, you can always come back to me. So save searches. I'm going to show you how to use the save search. So under your favorites, I've only saved one search. So I'm going to go ahead and find another area and save another search. I'm going to go to reporting tools. I'm going to go to query. I'm going to go to query viewer. So this is something I do want to save. So I'm going to add this to my favorites. And that one's been saved. Then I'm going to go to Query Manager, and I'm going to add this to my favorites also. Able to approve time and exceptions. So I'm also going to save a favorite for approvals. I don't have access to the training, but we'll just pretend I have employees listed there. And I'm going to save them. So now under favorites, I have several favorites, and I can edit these favorites. The most common activity that I probably will be doing is running queries. So I'm going to make query viewer first, query manager maybe third, modify a person second, and approvals will be fourth. So once I've done that, I'll save that. And when I go into my favorites, it'll put them in sequential order. If I want to delete one, I just select minus and it'll delete. Something that I did from my original page, go home here, favorites, I clicked on new window. This opened a couple of new windows for me. So right now I have 3 new windows open, and I could actually go to 3 different components. The most important thing to remember here is that each window that you have open, there's a timer that started on the very first window. After 15 to 20 minutes of inactivity on these other windows, the system will kick me out. So you need to make sure that you either close them when you're done with them or you toggle between them to keep them open. So we talked about favorites, how to add, delete favorites, and adding a new value. So again, this is typically something that occurs in central HR, but notice that the person ID right now says new. And I don't assign a Coyote ID, but the moment I select add a person, while it still hasn't assigned a number, there's certain criteria I must fill out before I save it in order for the system to initiate an ID. There's a separate training on how to use this component. If your job requires you to do this, you'll be trained by a subject matter expert. This is just a general overview. We're going to look at some other components of a page. So I mentioned that there's tabs on these different pages. I mentioned that we can collapse or expand certain areas by using these arrows. Let's see, the new window link I've highlighted. We've talked about add to favorites. Next are some shortcuts. You'll see icons on the system here on different pages. These are called shortcut buttons. So if we click on it, it opens up a calendar. For the search component, if I click on it, it's going to allow me to search for fields within this field. So for birth state, if I'm looking for California, so it begins with, so we have California. Each of these different fields have different search options whenever you see what we call our lookup. So if I use the birth country, it can give me a list of countries. So it's pretty intuitive there. Also notice that the tabs that we see at the top, you also have links at the bottom that take you to what we see at the top with tabs. Then you have within the different components. So here we can download, but we also have navigation within this row of data. So just looking at those details as you're granted your access to the area that you're going to see. Again, if there's any related links, they're going to show up down at the bottom. And then these are referred to as breadcrumbs. Whenever you see an arrow, that means there's more information available to navigate to. So for the data entry, there's basic fields, date fields, phone number fields. Unless you're going to be hiring new employees, on page 27 of the guide, you probably will not need this information. Just remember that whoever's training you, the subject matter expert, that specific criteria, that you are clear on the criteria that should be entered. Data in the system is so important to be clean. And if you have a role as a data entry in PeopleSoft, you have a very, very important role in keeping our data clean. So for queries, most people don't pull data from the system. However, you may have a need like in academic resources, may have to pull data. Based on your role, you'll be granted access to create queries. Very limited people on campus are able to create queries. Most of us in production are running queries that already exist. So I know I set up a favorite, or I thought I may have deleted them. So let me just go through and go to reporting tools, query viewer. All of our campus queries begin with SB underscore. So when you're searching for information, typically somebody's going to tell you from one of the central HR locations the name of the query that you're going to use. I'm going to use SB underscore always. Just do SB underscore and you'll see how many queries are SB underscore. And here it's telling me there's 300. And so I can view 100 at a time and it gives me all of these different queries. So you're going to also know by disabled or if it's current. There are some queries that are private that we don't see, and then there's the public queries. So typically, we're going to search for public queries that are available to us. So I'm going to go a little bit further here and see if we can get a little more information. So these are both disabled. This is a strictly new hired. It is disabled. Maybe it'll allow us to play with this one. Typically, you're not creating, but you're using a query that somebody else at a higher level has established for you or for your department. So for human resources, if you need to pull data from the human resources component, you'd have to get approval from human resources, work with their subject matter expert. We have some different options here to run our queries. We can run it to HTML, we can run it to Excel. HTML and XML have some similarities. XML you can bring into Excel. You can schedule a query to run at a later time. For lookup references, typically it'll give you some definition background, and then you can save a favorite. I'm going to make this one a favorite. So whenever I come here, it's always going to show my favorite query, SB underscore. So then this one, I'm going to select favorite. So now it's added this one to my favorites. And when I go to query viewer, my favorites show up. To run the reports or the queries, it's pretty simple. If I select HTML, it's going to open a new tab up here at the top, and it's going to initiate, hopefully, some results for us. I can also have multiple windows open. Remember, I can have multiple windows open, so I can try running 2 queries simultaneously and see if we get some results here. So this one is telling me it's no longer available. I ran out of time. So here is my HTML results, and it's giving me some general information. But notice that in the results for HTML, I can download it to Excel, I can download it as a CSV file or XML file. So to run a query is very simple. You're always going to be working from a query that a subject matter expert has established for you. I'm going to do CSV. Again, it downloaded it for me. And here I have the data results, and then I can manipulate it any